Final Fantasy has been around for over 30 years, with loads of releases including main entries, spin-offs, and with all these releases, there must be hundreds of titles that have been released for the Final Fantasy franchise. On that average, that certainly means that there are a few dozen games that are going to have received its fair share of criticism. And on that note, we've taken a list looking at the top 10 worst Final Fantasy games to have ever been released according to Metacritic. But of course, just before we do go into the video, if you do like this type of content and you would like to see some more top 10s, be sure to hit that subscribe button and of course, like this video. And with all that said, let's just get straight into it. These are the top 10 worst Final Fantasy games according to Metacritic. Number 10, Final Fantasy 13. This review is based on the PC version of Final Fantasy 13. This game got an 83 on PS3 and an 82 on Xbox 360. While it does have problems in the fandom, namely the linear pathways and overly dramatic story, it is far from the worst game in the series. The PC port was just a bad version of this game, filled with bugs, bad textures, slowdowns, and the list goes on. Number 9, A King's Tale Final Fantasy 15. This is based on the PS4 review, but anyway, this is a prequel to the main game, starring Noctis' father, and it's an old school beat 'em up, which sounds good on paper, but the execution was lacking. The biggest issue with this game is that it was single player, and that there wasn't any co-op mode. Number 8, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Echoes of Time. This review is based on the Wii version, while the DS original version got a 75. That isn't that much higher though, but 75 is still in Metacritic screen. The big problem with the Wii version is that it's just a blown up version of the DS, which makes it look on TV pretty terrible. The idea of allowing portable and console players to interact was a good idea, but in the execution, the console version wasn't quite as good. The game itself is a bit mindless and repetitive, but nonetheless quite fun when you're playing with friends. Number 7, Final Fantasy II. This review is based on the PSP release. To add some perspective, the Game Boy Advance bundle with the original Dawn of Souls got a 79. With the iOS version getting a 73. Comparatively speaking, the price on this port of the NES game was too high. As the game was bundled before, selling it on its own felt like a bit of a rip. In addition, the smoothed over graphics for the Game Boy Advance didn't sit as well with Final Fantasy fans. The game itself is quite weird, and unlike anything else in the series. Number 6, Final Fantasy IV The After Years. This review is based on the iOS version, while the original Wii release got a 69. There's not too much difference between them both, although it's not the port that's the problem, it's the game itself. It's a sequel to the original game that was seen something along the lines of being a fanfiction. Trying to maintain the fundamentals of the original game, while trying to be its own concept, was the initial idea, but one that fans had a hard time trying to adapt to. Number 5, Monster of the Deep Final Fantasy 15. Here's another spin-off to Final Fantasy 15. This exclusive PSVR game has Noctis fishing for giant creatures. It is an expanded version of the fishing minigame, but more intense and in VR. For the price though, many felt that it wasn't worth what it costs. After all, there probably aren't many people that want to go fishing in VR. Number 4, Final Fantasy 15 Multiplayer Expansion Comrades. The final spin-off highlighted from this universe was at first just a free update to the main game. It then annexed itself and became its own thing. Comrades is basically Monster Hunter, cloned with the Final Fantasy twist. Create an avatar, gear up, and go on hunts. The idea is good, as playing co-op in that world seems sound enough. Unfortunately, these quests were segregated to small sections of the game, meaning that it was no longer an open world. On top of that, the loading screens in the game went at a snail's pace. Number 3, Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. Moving on to the PS2 exclusive spin-offs to Final Fantasy VII, this was a sequel to the main game and film, showcasing Vincent as a Devil May Cry styled action shooter. Again, like many of these games, the idea sounded good in theory, but the execution itself wasn't quite all that. While the production values of the cutscenes were high even for the PS2, the rest of the game, however, isn't quite as good, as a lot of it was quite clunky, and the gameplay itself wasn't all that smooth. Number 2, Final Fantasy XIV Online. While all the previous games were seen as flaws, there were still fun to be had. The issue with this game though, is the original launch of Final Fantasy XIV was pretty horrific that it had to be shut down. Square Enix even issued an apology, and went back to work to completely remaking the game. To their credit though, the experience that came out of this is heralded as some of the best content that the series has ever seen. The reviews of this expansion are proof of that. Number 1, Final Fantasy All the Bravest. And officially considered to be the worst game according to Metacritic of the Final Fantasy series, this game was renamed by fans as Final Fantasy Tap to Win. All the players had to do is tap their characters, and the fights practically play themselves. Many believe that there is nothing salvageable about this experience, considering how autopilot this game is. And so there you pretty much have it. Those were the top 10 worst Final Fantasy games to have ever been released according to Metacritic. So what did you think of this list? Do you agree? Or perhaps that you think that there were some games that were pretty bad from the Final Fantasy series that weren't on this list and should have been included? So do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below, I would love to hear them. And of course, not forgetting that if you do like this type of content and you would like to see some more top 10s, be sure to hit that subscribe button and of course, like this video. I'll also leave some more content at the end of this video if you'd like to check them out, including some more Final Fantasy related videos. Thanks very much for watching guys, and I will see you all next time.